guys, welcome back. We got another episode today. We're going to look at UFC 270. We're not going to do a breakdown though. We're just going to talk a little bit about some of the, key topics that people are talking about. And it has to do with, you guessed it, the title fight between Francis Ngannou and Ngannou. I'm not doing a breakdown. I usually do breakdowns. If you want to do a breakdown though, you can go down to the description page and you'll see a link where my man Marshall did an awesome breakdown on the fight and he breaks down pretty much what happens. But what I do want to talk about is the jiu-jitsu part. And again, not the breakdown, but just the significance of jiu-jitsu in the fight. Like I've said, this is a jiu-jitsu channel, so we look at different martial arts. We study different types of techniques, obviously, within the jiu-jitsu realm. But we look at judo, wrestling, sambo, striking. And one thing that really resonated with this fight was the ability for Francis Ngannou to evolve as a fighter, to start using his fight IQ to really just branch himself. And I've always liked this fighter, of course. I wasn't like crazy about him like everyone else was. I'm guilty of judging him for thinking, well, he's just a power puncher. He's getting really, he's getting away with a lot of his athleticism, but he proved me wrong, and it made me not only respect him more, but I actually look up to him now as a fighter and martial artist because he learned what the essence of martial arts are, right? The essence is like really going down into finding out that there are several ways to win, really utilizing your technique, really utilizing your fight IQ, your sports psychology, if you will, your fight psychology. First thing, like I said, we're not going to break anything down, but one thing I noticed, right, is when he first walked in, he had the knee braces. Obviously, one of his knees were hurt, and the reason he wore two was to not give away which ones were hurt. He had a lot of good things. I mean, great wrestling, great transitions. Haragoshi that landed Serogan right on his shoulder / face. Beautiful setups. Even when he was taken down, he stayed calm, poised, under control, never panicked, was even controlling the wrist and doing some stuff. So again, if you really want to see a breakdown, go to Marshall's page. He did an awesome one. I want to talk about two main issues, and the first one is jiu-jitsu and MMA. We're starting to see, I don't want to say starting, but I think we're starting to understand not only the significance of grappling, but really, really understand its place and where it is. We saw a Francis Ngannou a few years ago who was just this power puncher. We saw him evolve into a person who studied jiu-jitsu and wrestling and learned to just defend the takedown, learn to transition into a ground and pound position, right? Several times he did it, especially with his last fight when he won the title. But now we saw him actually utilize jiu-jitsu. He was fatigued, he was tired. Not only did he do great jiu-jitsu, these were all fundamental positions. And you can tell he, if you look at Marshall's breakdown, he talks about how tired he was and how he remained under control the whole time. In 1993, when the first UFC was created, the whole point was to show the world that jiu-jitsu was obviously dominant. And I think that we're kind of coming full circle and understanding that. And I'm not just talking about jiu-jitsu. I'm obviously a jiu-jitsu guy, but I study all the grappling arts. I study a lot of the combat arts, from grappling, judo, striking. I've done it all. And we're starting to really understand, you need to have a full arsenal of all of these skill sets. And I've always said it, you got to be really proficient in a striking art, a grappling art, and a takedown art. And grappling and takedowns are in the same realm, but they do different things. And I think we were able to see that. And so that's the first thing I really want to talk about, was the significance of seeing jiu-jitsu at this level. It was just amazing. I was so impressed to watch it. I was so excited because, to be honest, I didn't expect it to go to the ground. If it did, I thought Serogan would have easily dominated the ground, but it was everything but that. And I hope you guys do enjoy that breakdown, Marshall, because he did a great job explaining the transitions and everything we've talked about in our different videos. The second thing I want to talk about is actually a very popular topic, and it keeps coming up, and it's the fighter's pay in MMA. Francis Ngannou is at the end of his contract with the UFC. He he didn't re-sign, so there's this issue. he got paid $600,000, which sounds like a lot of money because it is a lot of money. But when you look at what he's done and you look at where the UFC is and you see how big it is, I mean, it is big. And I used to follow the UFC back in the golden age before it was popular. I was what you called a true fan, without insulting any new fans. It's not that the newer fans were not truer, but back then the UFC barely made it. It was sold for, you know, very little money by the Gracie family. And they built it to just showcase jiu-jitsu. And it has grown and evolved into what it is today. And I think the big picture here is it's here to stay. It's mainstream. It is, in my opinion, the epitome of all sports. Because when you look at the history of sports, you look at combat sports, you read the history books, the age of the gladiator, the tale of the samurai, even the old folk tale of the great knight and the battles that they had, the chivalric codes. And you could go into detail all over the world and all over the history. There was nothing more badass than a combat fight. And the Olympics actually started, if you don't know, historically as a way to test the skills of the fighters. And so the original skills, if I'm not mistaken, was a wrestling match. The Olympics come from Greece. It was a wrestling match. It was a sprint. It was a long jump to test their athleticism. It was a javelin throw because that was one of the weapons in the battle, and it was I believe, a hammer throw because it was also one of the weapons that they would use for battle. And if I'm wrong, you're more than welcome to correct me. From my understanding, those were the original competitions, and it was to test who the best warrior was. And of course, wrestling was the original one because that was the hand-to-hand combat if you didn't have your weapons. And so when we look at sports, soccer, one of the world's most popular sport, basketball, football, American football, rugby, swimming, track and field, cycling, golf, great sports. But when you're talking about the sport of sports, nothing compares historically to combat sports. Nothing, I think Joe Rogan said this once, nothing is better than saying, hey, I could beat you in a real fight versus I could outrun you or I could out-hoop you in a basketball court. And for Francis Ngannou to be not only the baddest man on the planet, but certainly has evolved as a sophisticated martial artist, to be going through this issue. And when we look at things, martial artists, of course, the argument is said, is not about money. You're completely right. But there are certain principles here, right? He has to make a decent living. And like I said, 600,000, excuse me, is a lot of money. And he's going to be able to, take care of his family and loved ones. But there's a lot of bills that have to get paid, right? He's got a lot of coaches. He's got a lot of traveling to do. And when you compare that to what the UFC is making and what to other fighters are making, it's kind of embarrassing. And so this topic is super important. I hear there's like a legal issue now, and he's starting to lawyer up, as they say. He's trying to see if there's anything he can do. Other fighters, former fighters from the UFC and from boxing, current fighters from boxing are coming in to speak out for him. You have someone like, Conor McGregor, who is obviously a great fighter, has definitely put his time in, and he has earned so much more money, right, in the millions per fight. And he was really smart and is really smart with how he handles his money and how he's able to financially distribute his earnings into several investments through the company he made with his whiskey, through the restaurants. I mean, he's obviously not an idiot, and he does very well with that. And his branding is very good. So there's those arguments, and I understand that. But when you have the baddest man on the planet, the pound for pound, the best guy, is literally the guy, the heavyweight champion. And not only is he the champion because of his athletic ability, or because he's strong, like Joe Rogan stated more than once, it's because he is a great fighter. And if you look at his skill set, I mean, he was obviously not in his best shape and form on Saturday, but he still came out and he still played a very tactical, strategic game, and he still came up on top. And that made me respect him more. With a messed up knee, with bad cardio, He just didn't look his usual self, and you'll see more or less if you did see the fight. You'll understand what I'm talking about. And if you didn't see the fight, go see Marshall's breakdown. He'll explain some of that stuff. Yet he came back on top technically. So for them to put him through this, it's just an embarrassment to see where the UFC has gone from back in the golden age to now. To see how it's at the epitome of what it is right now. This is like the biggest it's ever been. It's on ESPN. You're getting Sports Center coverage. I remember seeing Sports Center 20 years ago, and it was just football, basketball, and some highlights of some unknown sports sometimes, right? You get Sports Center now covering highlights of the UFC. This is amazing what has happened. And to see jiu-jitsu grow, to see boxing grow, to see martial arts in general just grow to the next step, I think we need to do a better job of treating our fighters who are out there putting their lives at risk, getting hit in the head, slammed on their face, putting in the time. And it's not typical like a football game where you play every Sunday, or a soccer game where you play every weekend, or a basketball game where you can play every 2-3 days. Fighting is hard on the body, and you're not cleared sometimes for many months, sometimes a year minimum. It's a lot of damage to the head. It's a tough sport, and it's a reason why these guys many times don't last long. They peak early in their 20s, maybe 30s if they took care of themselves, and then that's it. It's done. And what do they have to show for it but scars and residue of really bad economics? Again, I'm no king when it comes to this type of topic. I'm just speaking on what has happened historically. So those are the things I want to talk about mainly, is how jiu-jitsu came up and how Francis Ngannou showed a perfect example of character and poise and martial arts and fight IQ. Amazing to see him evolve into the fighter he is. I hope they make a deal where he comes back and he stays in the UFC and he defends his title more. I'm excited to see him fight. But if he does not and he decides to do boxing or whatever for more money, I completely understand as well. And the second topic, having said that, is seeing where MMA is going. The UFC is dominating the MMA brand. And if you've been watching MMA for a few years, then you know the days of pride fighting and some of those big events that used to really do well. It's great to see where it's come. Even jiu-jitsu now, the matches in the ADCC, they're starting to really do well and pay the fighters more money. Pay the fighters, period. Nearly not enough to make a living, in my opinion, but at least they're getting started. I'm excited to see it going forward. I just hope that they can do more. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If there's something you can do, you should do it. And what can you do? I think there's several things. I think you can start writing these comments onto these articles, sharing these articles that are talking about fighter pay. I think it's a big issue. I think no one's talking about it enough. I think more writers and more articles are getting published. I think it's a good thing to talk about, and I think the more you expose people to the conversation, the more pressure these people will get to finally do some of this stuff. And I'm not here to criticize anyone. There's no personal contempt I have for someone. There's none of that. It's more of do what's right and take care of these fighters. Dana White wasn't there to strap the belt over Ngannou, which was kind of not cool. He wasn't there for the post-fight interview. Not cool as well. I understand there's legal issues, but there's things that Dana White has done great for the sport. You can't deny that. From building this company that was nearly zero and almost died, and for him to rebuild it and really come up with the investors to buy it and return it into what it is, he's done an amazing thing for the fight game, and he will always hold a place in the history books. But just because you do great things doesn't mean that you can't do bad things, and I think that's what's going on here. I think there's some things that he can do better. Again, he's got a lot of pressure, I'm sure, from all these shareholders, so he's going to take care of them. But at the end of the day, we need to take care of our fighters, because without them, there's no UFC. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Share the comments. Tell me what you think. What's your opinion on the fighter pay? What's your opinion on jiu-jitsu in MMA now? You're starting to see it more. I think people are starting to realize that you can't, go without studying any of these facets, whether it's striking, grappling, takedowns. It was just a beautiful display. Looking forward to hearing that. And again, if you want to see the breakdown, go to Martial Minds page. He did a great one on the main event. I'll post the link there and hope you guys enjoy. See you soon.